With an early access map of already 24 square kilometers and literally hundreds of different resources, it's pretty easy to get lost in Enshrouded. I've spent over 60 hours exploring everything you need to know about it, and today I'm back with another guide to share what I think are the absolute best farming spots to get your hands on all the essential resources for the early game in Enshrouded. From Shroud Cores, Wood and Liquid to Salt, Flax and Copper Hotspots. Everything you need to get your hands on to upgrade your base and character for any future adventures. So without further ado, let's get farming. A quick reminder, if you're still looking for a server to host Enshrouded on, play with friends, be sure to check out my ref link in the description to get a nice discount during checkout. Alright, so first off, we have Twigs. You might have already realized that if you gather these bushes, you get a couple plant fibers, as well as twigs, but every single time you only get one. And especially for arrow crafting, you're gonna need a lot of these. But I found a pretty amazing location to get your hands on a ton of these early game, right next to the Cinder Vault. You just want to be a little bit to the northeast or south of your home, basically, if you decided to place it right there. When you're on an adventure in the Shroud, I definitely recommend you to keep an eye out for these bushes as well, as if you gather them, you also get some of these twigs, which can make it a lot easier to craft arrows when in desperate need for them. Next up, we have resin. This is something you can find from trees if you chop them down. Unfortunately though, most trees will only give you wood when gathered, or one single resin, which is going to require a lot of chopping down them trees, while if you focus on these orange-leafed trees, you'll be able to get your hands on resin a lot easier, as these actually drop less logs but much more resin. I don't think bones and animal fur need a lot of explanation, as you can basically find this from all the creatures you hunt during your adventures. Especially the goats, I think, are super easy to take down with bow and arrow. They drop a lot of this. I definitely recommend you to keep an eye open for trees with beehives, as they can give you both wax and honey when harvested. Especially the honey, you will literally have stamina on steroids. For early game, this is amazing to harvest resources, mine ore, chop down trees, or in general do a lot of dodge rolls in combat. Next up, we have sheet metal. One of my absolute favorite locations to farm this would be Rookmoor, which can be found a little bit northwest of your starter area or southwest of the Ancient Spire Springlands. Right here, you can basically interact with anything on the floor. All humanoid scavengers in this area will drop metal scraps, which is an amazing farm for the early game, while this is also a fantastic location to quickly get your hands on flint. If you destroy this wall right here, a little bit southwest of Rookmoor, this is where you can use your pickaxe to mine a passage to one of my favorite spots to get your hands on Flintstone early game. So you just want to follow the road, and look at that, this already brings you to a big place where you can get your hands on plenty of this. For torn cloth, I think you should be in the Shroud, especially near Braylin Bridge, where you have this elixir well, like one of your first objectives. As in this area, you can take out these guys, and they drop a ton of this, and also Shroud Spores. While you can also find runes right here, which would basically drop from all sorts of creatures which you take out in the wild. Since we're already here, let me also show you where you can pick up Shroud Wood, as this is something actually also very easy to get your hands on. Find these bigger trees. I think these are the easiest to take out. They will drop a ton of those. While the smaller plants in this area, like these little flowers, they drop Shroud Liquid. You can also chop down these bigger mushrooms, as they also drop the Shroud Liquid. So there you have it, Shroud Liquid, Shroud Wood, and the Shroud Spores. That's basically it for all the essentials to pick up early game. We still need some Shroud Cores, Shroud Sacks, etc., which we're going to talk about a little bit later in this video. But moving on to mid-game essentials, let's first check out clay, copper, and also honey. If you already have access to the Ancient Spire Springlands or the Ancient Spire Revelwood, right in between them you can actually find plenty of these resources, very close to the Ancient Vault where you picked up the Farmer. For this, I totally recommend you to unlock the glider first, which I already covered in a previous video, so be sure to check it out. It can be found in the top right of the screen. Hours and hours went into making this guide, so it would be very much appreciated if you can spare 1 second of your time and hit that like button if you enjoy the content so far. Already very much appreciated. So now copper, clay, and honey. Let's cover honey first. For this resource, I absolutely love visiting Willow Crush, which is a pretty small village right in between the first pillar or spire Springland's fast travel and the one of Revelwood. In this area, you can find a couple flame shrines, but most importantly, this place is filled with bee nests. We talked about this resource for the early game as well, while this place is a much better farm spot, as right here you can find so many of these trees. I mean, look at our surroundings right now. This is literally covered with the resource. While it's also an amazing spot to farm for more scraps if you still need more of that. A little bit northeast of this specific farming zone, you can find a ton of resources as well. Both a clay vein as well as one with copper right there. Check it out. So if you quickly want to pick up some clay, this is the perfect place to be. Let me show you this one on the map in a second, but this is where you will find your copper. So swing that pickaxe and you will find plenty of these. If we open up the map for a second, this is exactly what it looks like. South of the carpentry camp. If you specifically farm wood and ore, you also want to pick up a couple skills which can make this even more efficient. Lumberjack will deal 30% more damage against wooden objects and trees. With Mason, you will do the same for ore. You can also pick up Miner to have an additional 10% chance to gain more of those resources. And with quality gear, your tools will lose durability 50% slower. Awesome if you want to farm a lot of this, while if you travel to the ancient spire Revelwood, there is a lot more to be found. If you look to the west from this zone and jump down, you already see a ton of all that orange in the distance. Especially this flank of the wall right here is where you can pick up a lot more clay. Many lumps of clay can be harvested from this wall, while if you jump down, there is even more, like a lot of all this resource on the sides down below. Next up, we have another camp, which is called the Mark of Sameth. If you look to the west of this one, I also placed a waypoint right there, which allows me to instantly quick travel to the zone. But the Mark of Sameth is another sweet spot where you can primarily harvest copper ore. This is one of those places where it's literally filled with this resource. In correlation with the Springlands and the Revelwood quick travels, to the east we also have the Glimmer Rock Mine, another sweet spot to farm a ton of copper. This is also where you will find the Pillars of Creation. So if we look at the spires, that's the first one, that's the Revelwood one, and that's basically where we can find the mine. So the border of the forest and the hill desert basically. As you can see, this is where you can find plenty more of that resource. While we want to leave the rest be right now, let's move on to the rest. A little bit northeast of the Mark of Sameth and the ancient spire Revelwood, you can also find the abandoned hunter camp, which you need to visit for a certain quest. While right here, you can also come across plenty of these Azure Russulas. A food source, when grilled at the fire, can give you some nice stats. While this is not the only reason why you want to visit this cave, as inside it you will find plenty of poisonous spiders. I warn you guys, poison in this game can be pretty brutal, so be sure to prepare for this. But if you take a torch with you, it will be pretty easy to get through, find all sorts of treasure. And especially at the very end of this cave system, you will find dozens of spiders. And if you take out every single one of them, you will have a ton of critter parts at your disposal, which you also need for certain crafts. Now, you no longer have to focus on plant fiber. These instantly drop both critter parts and the strings right now. So that's going to make everything so much easier, especially crafting bandages. Anyways, while you're here, be sure to also mine some of this Luminous Growth, as this can make your base look so much better. I think this is one of the best looking building blocks in the game, and it also has a nice use case, as you don't have to use any light sources like candles, which look pretty primitive. I mean, if we enter my base, look at the flooring. I think it looks really nice, instantly lights up the entire place. But this is not the only beautiful type of block which you can make. Now that we've made our way a little bit more to the north of the forest, you will now start finding a lot more new resources, including the flax. These are blue whitish flowers which you want to pick up at all times, as it's a very important resource for linen. Linen is used for all sorts of blueprints, including the marksman set, which I currently have equipped, but also the advanced glider. What I think is an amazing location to get your hands on a ton of flax is to basically use the Ancient Spire Revelwood fast travel and fly towards the southeast to this Fawn Song frontier. Also a nice amount of copper, strawberries, all sorts of resources which you can come across. But this is also where you can find some chamonile. First, you're gonna have to process it at the hand spindle though, which only takes a couple seconds, so you don't have to spend a lot of time at this bench. Especially for the armor set, you also want to dry some animal fur at the drying rack. And for this, you also need salt. So let me quickly show you a super easy location where you can pick that up. Actually, at the very beginning of the game, at the first Shroud location. So if we look down right here, this is where you can find a little tower. Also sticking out of the shroud, so you don't even have to worry about the timer. But this is southwest of the Braylin Bridge. This is basically what salt looks like. These square-ish shaped rocks. If you mine them, you will get a very nice amount of salt. This can without doubt be found all over the place, but this is probably the most accessible one for the early game. You're now also probably wondering how you can make goo. Well, we already got a ton of critter parts earlier. If you visit Balthazar, your alchemist, you can make the goo at the resources right here if you combine bug dust and Shroud Liquid. Bug dust, you only need critter parts for that, so perfect if you combine this all very easily, which I always store in the base so I can instantly use it with, of course, those magical chests. So now you're probably wondering, how do I make the magical chests? Because they are so nice. Well, indeed, they are OP. For this, you first need to unlock the carpenter though, which I already shared in a previous guide. But for this, you need nails, wooden planks, metal sheets, goo, but also shroud cores. So where do you find the shroud cores? I found a pretty nice location earlier, which is not that far away from the early starter zones. Go to this pillar, the Ancient Spire Low Meadows, as it brings you right in front of an enshrouded place where you can actually pick up this resource. So from the tower itself, you're gonna fly towards this ring of ruts right in between the Ancient Vault Hunter and the spire itself. Every time when you restart the world, this thing seems to regrow, so we're just gonna quickly take it out, which makes everything so much easier to see. And there we have them, the flying bad guys, that's what I'm talking about, which are pretty easy to take out if you land a couple headshots. Look at that, we've got some torn cloth, shroud cores, and runes. So be sure to keep an eye out for these bad guys to get your hands on this resource as much as possible. I absolutely love my base location, by the way, because it's very close to all these resources. I'm going to share it in another video, but it's basically right there, right in between all the different spires or pillars, so I can easily access all the resources. But right now, we basically want to make our way to the Lone Thistle. This is also where you can find an elixir well, but it's basically to the east of the Ancient Vault Farmer. This is actually a really nice farm spot, because if you're standing right in front of this house, you actually don't have the Shroud timer. So once again, you can quick travel away from it, but we basically want to focus on those plants. If you take them out, level 11 ones, especially easy to do with that bow and arrow, you'll be able to get the Shroud Sacks. So that's already 2 of them. See? Sometimes it can be a little bit annoying to reach them. That's why I like to also bring a pickaxe. I mean, this makes it even easier to get upstairs and take them out. But yeah, if you've gathered enough linen and dried fur, you should also be able to craft yourself that medium backpack. I think an amazing one to equip to dramatically increase your carrying capacity. I mean, look at that. We have another full row of inventory space. An essential inventory upgrade to make these a lot more efficient. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today's video. Everything you basically need to know to get ready for Enshrouded. By the way, be sure to make one of these towers, which is going to make it even easier to get some height advantage and use your glider to reach distant lands. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, a big thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like button if you found this video helpful, and be sure to subscribe, as plenty more of these guides are coming your way, both beginner tips and advanced guides for the mid and end game. Be sure to share your thoughts about it, what you think of Enshrouded. Right now though, it's 4 AM out. I want to wish you an amazing day. I'll check you in the next video. Take care. Peace.